Welcome to Archery Talk 101 podcast, your guide to better archery skills. We'll bring you the latest tips, tricks, and expert advice, but that's not all. We'll also have interviews with top archers and industry professionals and reviews of the latest gear and equipment and much more. Hey, we have a special treat today. We're going to talk to an archer that's actually out on a boat fishing, taking kids with him on a fishing trip. Hi, my name is Rory Canterbury. I'm the host on Arch Talk 101, and we have Corey on the line with us. How you doing today, Corey?
I'm good. How are you, sir?
Doing great. So tell us a little something about yourself.
Probably the most interesting thing about me is I actually recently started my own tackle company. So basically, it's kind of a long story, but I saw a need in the fishing industry and I didn't see anything like it on the market. So I went ahead and I got a patent on a product. And then through a long story, I tried to develop it with another large tackle manufacturer, and they ran into a lot of roadblocks and hiccups. So they kind of ended up backing away from the idea and the concept. And I didn't want to let the idea go because it needs to be in the industry. So we launched Macula Tackle as the name of the company. We've been in business now for 2 years.
Cool. We'll get in a little bit more detail a little bit later, but first I want to hear about your archery experience. What made you start picking up a bow the first time?
All right. Well, I started archery shortly after my first kid was born. My brother-in-law was into it, and so he really wanted someone to go with him. So I went out. My godfather had a little bit of land, and he said that we could go ahead and hunt it for archery. His stipulation or rules were they hunt it heavily for firearm season. So they said that, if we just have to stop hunting 2 weeks prior to the gun season to let everything cool down, because apparently all the drives and stuff and me running after deer. No, I'm joking. That they just thought less human presence maybe made it a little better for them. And I remember getting a bow, and it was I think it was like an old PSC. It was at the time it was called like Buckmaster, and I guess it was supposed to be like some high-end bow for the time. And I think I paid like $200 for it. And I remember going, man, this is going to be an expensive hobby. Wow, have things changed? And I remember, the old crappy peep sights and everything before they were actually had like good like fiber optics, things of that nature. So, and then I remember that bow being incredibly loud as well. And one of the first times we went out hunting, got everything kind of set up. And I remember I was in the tree stand, and like we were fairly close to a gravel road, and on the other side of the gravel road were a bunch of houses. Well, somebody was burning like leaves or something in early September, and I mean it was just like smoking me out of the woods. And all of a sudden this deer just comes running by me, and I was like, what the heck was that? It was the first time I actually saw a deer like up close, and it just went running behind me towards the gravel road, and it stopped. And I'm like, well, I'm never going to see him again because the wind was all wrong. But I think the smoke actually kind of helped the situation, because the deer was not really paying attention to me. And all of a sudden he started running back towards me, and he was coming like behind me to the left. And I drew my bow back because I'm like, I don't know. I've never practiced any running shots, but I'm like, I don't know what's going to happen here. And he came running around this tree, and I'm like, I better lead this thing. So I kind of was trying to lead the deer, and I let the arrow fly, and I knew I hit it, and it just spun out and like landed in front of me. And I'm like, oh my gosh, I got a deer. And then it like started to like get up again. I'm like, wait, this isn't what is supposed to happen. And so I knocked another arrow, and then I, since it was laying there, I finished it off with another shot. And then I had to go, my brother-in-law and his friend were out there too. So I remember getting down, I walked by the deer. I went over to where those guys were. I'm like, hey, Bob, I just shot a deer. And he goes, did you mark where you shot it? And I'm like, well, yeah. And so he came back, and it was so weird. When we were looking at the deer, trying to figure out like what's actually happening. How did we get this deer? Where did I hit it the first time? I hit it in the temple.
Oh,
and that broadhead was dead center in its brain, because we found out when we were butchering it and I was taking the rack up, it was just a little 6-pointer. and then ended up finding the arrow buried in it. It was like, how was that thing even trying to stand back up? So that was the start of my archery passion. Now, to make the story even longer or more interesting, we had a second kid, and then my wife, with fishing and hunting, she said, hey, we don't have enough time for you to be hunting and fishing. So she said, well, pick one or the other. And so I ended up backing away from archery for several years because my daughters were younger, actually several years. And then I had a son, and probably at the age of about 7, 8 years old, he expressed some interest in archery. And youth bows have kind of come leaps and bounds.
Yeah.
State of Minnesota had changed the rule that, I think you only have to draw. I think at the time it might have, with systems on modern bows, they're a lot easier to handle. So, I worked with my son when he was young to try to get him to be strong enough to be able to, draw the bow back, hit his targets and everything. And when he had turned 10 years old, we finally I got back into the hunting thing. And so as a young kid, you tell them, hey, if you get a big deer or something like that, we'll think about mounting it. And so I think he had it in his head that, seeing deer is easy and the hunting was going to be easy. And the very first day I brought him out at 10 years old, I think that actually I don't quote me. I think that might have been a rule where there was an age and a poundage requirement. So I think that's why we started at age 10. Either that, or that's where he finally got better, more comfortable with his archery, and was able to draw that weight. And the very first day in a side-by-side tree stand, we had a doe directly under us. And actually it was like smelling the tree, the steps and what's crazy is with everything with scent killers and things you spray and put down and try to do everything right, it's incredible that she was putting her nose in every step we made from the field all the way into the stand. It was insane. And so he never took the shot, even though she was right there, because he thought day one, this is going to be easy. Well, then the rest of the year, we never got close to another deer. So it kind of became one of them like, oh crap. I want him to experience a hunt. And there was one later day that same year, because we went weeks without seeing a deer close. We saw him in distance, but we never had anything close. And I had him in a ground blind where I could see him. He was, right on the field edge. I was only like 20 yards into the woods. And there was a basket 8-point buck that was coming. And I'm like, it got to the edge. I let it go by me. It was sitting there, and Cole was in the ground blind. And I know he was probably shaking like crazy. And then the deer did not like the ground blind in the field. So it ended up turning back around, and then it was coming by me. And I'm like, you know what? Even though I want my son to shoot one, I think, getting a deer, having a positive experience was very important. So right. I had a very ethical shot to take, and I took the shot, and he knew, because he heard right away when I shot that, something happened. So I got down, usually you're supposed to wait, a while to get down, but he ran away from me. So I knew I was pretty safe. So I got down, I went to the ground blind, and Cole was like, did you shoot one? I'm like, yeah. And of course, young kids are very excited. They want to just run and go, like thinking you're just going to go get it. No. So we waited, I think about a half hour, and so we went tracking. And this was kind of funny too, because here's, I'm letting Cole kind of, there's the arrow, there's some blood, there's some more blood. And then it was like, we were tracking it in kind of a straight line. And then all of a sudden, zero blood. It was like, well, this is weird. And it had gotten dark at that point. So I'm like, well, let's just go back to the car. We'll get flashlights and we'll come back. And we were tracking that straight line. But I kind of told him at a young age, like, don't go too far ahead, because you don't want to step and flip leaves over that might cover up blood. anything like that, you gotta, you know, stay back or whatever. And then we had like a pretty good spotlight, and right where the blood had ended, I started shining, and then lo and behold, only like 20 yards ahead of us, that deer was laying dead. So he got to experience the tracking part, which wasn't perfect, but he got to see what had to happen. He got to drag a deer. What was cool is, you kind of get nervous, like, are these kids gonna be afraid of blood and guts and things like that? And you just tell them, turn away if it's gonna make you queasy or something like that. And he was all like, this is really, everything was brand new to him and super cool. And that's where he kind of developed his passion, and it was fun to share it with him. So the story gets better if you got time.
We got time.
I could just keep talking.
If you got battery, we got time.
So it was the follow. So the rest of the year, I brought him out, and we had some close encounters with not what we would call maybe like an ethical shot to take, brush in the way, maybe kind of a funky angle or something like that. So
yeah.
We never got close. So then when he turned 11 years old, then the very next year, this was very exciting. The Minnesota Vikings were playing I think it was like the Cleveland Browns, and they should have dominated the game. I was watching it, and Cole went in the backyard to practice. It was the opening day or opening weekend of archery season. We had the tree stand out. We were all ready to go. And he was practicing in the backyard on the 3D target. I'm watching the Vikings, and of course they end up losing. So I'm in a bad mood. I have no idea how they lost to a crumb team, but that's the Vikings. They're gifted at that. There's no better team in the NFL at losing a game they should dominate than the Minnesota Vikings. So anyways, he was in the backyard, and I know he was shooting, and all of a sudden he came in the house. He was in tears and upset at the world. And what happened is he had shot, and his arrow was a little high, and it ticked the back of the target, and it launched, and he lost an arrow. So he was all upset that he lost an arrow, and didn't, and he was like, well, he was in his room kind of crying a little bit, and I went in there, and I'm like, hey, nobody is perfect in this world, and it's the people that put a mistake behind them and actually go, okay, I don't want to make that mistake again. What went wrong? Let's go out and fix it so we don't do anything wrong in the woods. So I went out after the game, and we shot it at the target a little bit, and we got a fish on here, a little live action.
Oh yeah.
I'm gonna guess it's a 12 or 14-inch bass.
Live action video.
Oh, it's a rock bass. So anyway, so he had practiced, and he actually started doing really well with his accuracy and the yardage, and I'm like, all right, it's up to you. Do you want to go, or and he's like, yeah, let's go hunting. So we, and I don't know how, I mean, everybody who probably follows these podcasts has their own routine. I used to be very much like showers and scent killing stuff and scent this nose blocker, play the, everything. But and all my years of like deer hunting, it's incredible. Those things, they know where you are. It's just that it's just I think if they feel like if you may have kept walking and they didn't quite see you, that they might be a little comfortable coming out. It's hard to say. So, took the shower, and I don't know what you think, but I think the majority of our scent exits our bodies through our nose and our mouth. That's just me. And it's like, why doesn't somebody develop? Well, somebody will probably do it now, like a gum that you can chew, because that's what was always tough when
they have a gum you can chew, but it's
okay.
Nasty to chew.
Yeah. So I did kind of
says it's nasty. Tastes like alfalfa.
That's no good. So what I would do would just be eat an apple. I had heard that a long time ago, like one of those older wives' tales, if you will, or whatnot, that maybe that would be a better way, because the acids of the apple will kind of, keep your mouth from putting out bad smells. I don't know. So we both kind of eat an apple on the way to the tree stand, or actually before we get out of the car, and then head to the tree stand. And so we get out there. We got out really early. I thought it was early. So we're in the side by side tree stand again. And, it can be boring. It can
Yeah.
be really boring. And here you got 11-year-old kid sitting there. And there was a decent trail in front of us. Now, I'd love to just go marching every bit of sign and everything, but sometimes it's like if it's decent sign, I kind of like back off and just like we had a really good entry plan and exit plan without being busted. So we went into the stand, we were up, everything was quiet and still. There was a raccoon we got to walk around a little bit in the woods. And then I did see a couple does enter the field from a different area, like a different property that we don't have permission to hunt. And then it was like they weren't coming our way. And then you get kind of sleepy. And I told Cole he can watch the woods to the left. I'm gonna watch the field more to the right in case anything comes on that trail. And it started to get, I drifted off a couple times, and then all of a sudden I get a little tap on my shoulder. And I turn and look, and Cole leans over and he goes, "There's a deer over there." And I'm like, I'm looking and I'm like, I see nothing. And it was the same area where the raccoon was.
Oh,
So I'm like, yeah, sure. And then so I was, just kind of whispered to him. I'm like, well, is it a buck or it's a doe? And he goes, "It's a buck." And I'm like, yeah, sure. Like the year before, every doe we saw, oh, that was a big buck, or could have been a buck. I don't know. I didn't see it, but it was in his world. Everything at that point was a buck. And so I'm just like, I'm looking, all of a sudden I saw a little brown, and I'm like, oh, it is a deer. And it's off in the distance, and I'm just like kind of watching, and it's kind of slowly coming up the trail. And I'm like, holy crap, it is a buck. So he had already, it was kind of coming at a normal pace on the trail, and he stood up, and I'm just watching him because I'm the backup guy, and I'm thinking, well, what's this deer gonna do? And Cole had drew his bow back, and he was holding, and the deer stopped, and it was like 40 yards away, and it was facing us kind of. And so I'm like watching, and I'm watching Cole. He's holding his bow back, and I'm like, and he's kind of looking at, he kind of looked back at me one time, kind of panicked, and I'm like, I told him let off, and he let off, and he's just standing there. And I'm kind of watching the body language of the deer, and I'm watching the body language of Cole, and I kind of look up at him, and it's like, I'm like, breathe. I didn't see any motion in his lungs. He was just like holding his breath, and I was like, relax, breathe. So I saw him take a deep breath, and we were just watching this deer. And it was where we were was like there was where the trail was a little bit of a highland, and it just dipped down a little bit. And the tree we were on, we were obviously would have an angle down, but it looked like the deer was looking straight at us when he was probably looking more at our feet area, if you will. So I'm sitting there watching this deer, and then the deer kind of looked like, oh, I'm pretty comfortable or whatnot. And he put his head down and he started walking. So Cole drew his bow back, and I'm like, okay, here we go. And then at this point, I mean, I thought it was a buck, but I didn't know how big. And I was just kind of watching, and then as it was coming up the trail, right when it was at about 12 yards, there was one big tree, and it stopped. And so I'm looking, and I'm like, I have a shot at this thing right now, but we're gonna watch this deer, and I'm like, I'm looking at its head, and it was a very nice rack, and I'm like, I was excited. I'm getting the shakes, and I'm looking at Cole holding his bow back at 11 years old, and the deer kind of looked left, looked right, and he kind of did a little tail shake, and then he started coming, and he came right behind that tree, and it was like a perfect shot. And I'm like looking at Cole, like, and I'm just like, why? I'm like, shoot him. And he shot, and I remember it so vividly. I mean, when that impact is, and there's something about hunting that when the arrow hits, you see it. It's everything slow motion and zoom, even with bad eyesight, and that arrow just went right where it should, and the deer turned and ran back the other way. And I'm like, we're high-fiving, and I'm shaking him, and I'm all pumped for him, and I'm like, this is going to be incredible. It was an incredible shot. We want to give this thing a lot of time. He wanted to get down right away. And I'm like, well, let's maybe so this is on my godfather's land. And I said, let's call my brother-in-law, who lives like 20 minutes away, not far, to see if he could come give us a hand with tracking and all of the things that you need to do. So we get down, and we were walking the opposite direction. So I wasn't worried about like kicking him up or anything like that. And go back to the car. We waiting for my brother-in-law to show up, and got flashlights and headlights and things like that. And so I'd say about 45 minutes to an hour had passed, and we went back after my brother-in-law showed up. It's Cole's godfather as well. So we get to the woods. We're kind of looking around for that first blood. There's a tree stand. This is where the deer was. This is where he shot it. And I wasn't seeing anything. And Jason's like, well, how was the shot? And I'm like, in my opinion, it's like double lung and probably clipped the heart. I mean, it was like right there. It was a 10-yard shot, chip shot. He was right there. This is where he hit it. And we're looking, put Cole up in the tree stand. He had school the next day because this was on Sunday when the Vikings lost. And I'm just like, where is their blood? I mean, there has to be blood. There has to be blood. And so we had spent about probably close to an hour working this one small area. And Cole's like, yeah, that's where it was. That's where it was. And I'm standing there. And this was the interesting thing. Now, people that hunt a lot more and have more success with bucks, I've read articles on it that even though you can see a dominant trail, that could be a doe trail. And that bucks sometimes use another trail of their own where they don't want to walk where does are. Because I kept looking up the trail where I thought he ran. That deer split off of that trail, and there was a secondary tiny little trail that you couldn't really see until I saw the arrow. And I'm like, Jason, I found some arrow. Cole, we got the arrow over here. Oh, I got some more blood. So Cole came down, and we just kind of sat back and said, this is your deer. You track this thing. And we brought like a roll of toilet paper. So when we find blood, we put a little piece of toilet paper down just in case something happened. And Cole did a fantastic job. And we're just looking. And all of a sudden it was like right straight ahead of us. The thing ran maybe 35 yards, 40 yards max. And there was this deer. And then when you get up close to it, this thing was big. Body. And so I'm looking at my brother-in-law like, oh my gosh, like the mosquitoes were kind of bad at that time. So we wanted to get it out of the woods to the field edge where we had more space. And we started to drag it. And Cole was trying to help us, and we were struggling. And I'm like, we got to do this in here. So and we kind of just watched them through everything and did a great job. So we gutted it out, and I thought I was going to die. My brother-in-law thought he was going to die. So we literally get this thing up to the field edge, and he's like, do you think you can drive a car there? At the time, I had a 1997 Saturn SL, not a wagon, sedan. That's what I had. So I'm like, I think it'll make it back here. So I drive the car back, and I think the first time we tried to get it up and into the trunk, because I was like, we're never going to get the trunk shut anyways, but we can probably get its legs to fold in, and we'll get it in the car. And the first time was an epic fail. And I mean, it was horrific. And then I think it was like the third or fourth time we finally got its body in the trunk. And somehow by, an act of God, we were able to bend its legs went towards like where the back seats would be, and his body slipped in there, and somehow we rolled the head around, and we were actually able to get the trunk shut. So this was at like 10 o'clock at night. I don't know how many people I had that were into archery, that like my close friends at archery hunt a lot more, way more successful than I ever have been. That we got this deer and sent photos and everything. And then, of course, you have to hit all your friends' house on your way back home. And my really good friend Brian, we stopped at his house, and he's like, "Where's your deer?" I'm like, "It's in the trunk." He's like, "What?" And we opened that trunk, and that deer, he was like, "How in the heck did you get this thing in here?" I'm like, "Saturn's a do-it-all vehicle, And Cole was beyond excited. Right, the next day, told all of his teachers, because up here, archery, hunting in general is a very especially in the areas that we live, we're outside of the cities, if you will. And, it seems like you have a lot more people that are into the outdoors, hunting,
Right.
fishing, things of that nature. And teachers, the teachers that are into it all. So, I mean, it was going around school about Cole's deer. It was a 10-pointer. He went down to the Deer and Turkey Classic that year. They had it, and he had it scored in it, and it actually made the green score or whatever it was. I don't know, it was green. I don't even know how to do all that stuff, but it was like 135 and like a quarter or 2/3. It was like a weird number because one side had one young record book in Minnesota, and so it's super exciting. And then before a lot of this had happened, like Cole also did firearm safety, and there's a camp in Minnesota called Forkhorn Camp. So if you have any like archery viewers in the Minnesota area and their kids are interested in everything, the first year of camp you can get your firearm safety. The second year you could do a lot more with archery, and then the third year was kind of more of just a fun year. You can do whatever you want with the camp. So if you are a member of Minnesota Deer Hunters Association, they have like they will sponsor kids to go to this camp where they'll pick up the bill if you're a member. So it's a great way to become a member of a good organization, support the organization, and then also, the kids get a lot of education with it. So that's kind of like the whole, like what my, like in a nutshell, what got me into archery hunting. I actually have had like 3 hardship years with archery. We've had dry conditions where swamps, it's hard to, when it got so hot and dry, the deer stayed in the swampy areas that were mostly dry. And so the ones that would come out to the edges would be so late at night to come out to feed that I didn't have the greatest last 3 years. But I also decided for some reason, and here's me with archery in a nutshell. I've gun hunted a little bit, but I just never enjoyed it as much as archery. And archery is challenging for sure, but it feels, in my opinion, it's very, very rewarding when you're successful. It's, everybody who hunts, with the firearms always is saying, just got up in the stand, and then as soon as shooting light, there was something, 50 to 100 yards away, and put the scope on, boom, down, done. And it's like, that's not archery. Archery, it feels like you're very in tune with the outdoors. You have to do so many things right to be successful that I really like the challenge. And then for some reason, I decided to start archery hunting turkeys. just to make everything wicked complicated.
Yeah, they do present a different challenge, don't they?
Yes, absolutely. I'm just checking my battery percentage. Oh, we're good. So I know I probably talked for like 40 minutes straight.
Yeah, well,
right there.
yeah, that's okay. That's what it's about, is hearing your stories. And they don't hear my stories over and over, so yours is more interesting than mine because they probably all heard mine.
Okay. Yeah.
I've had some
well, what
go out and don't have much blood either.
One thing like that at Minnesota Deer Hunters Association. Oh, I was gonna say, like, after Cole had shot that deer and the story went around, even with like our Deer Hunters Association chapter, my oldest daughter, helped Cole.
You're starting to break up.
Write the article, and they published it in, I don't remember the name of the magazine. I have one in my room yet, but it had the photos of his deer and us together, and it was kind of our story. And Cole, I'm sorry, maybe I'll stand up. It in, and then okay. Let me know when we're good again.
Yeah, you're good now.
Okay. All right. I'll just have to have my arm about ways up into the clouds. But
Yeah.
no, I was just saying that his uh his experience was published in a magazine as well for the Deer Hunters Association, and that was kind of a cool accomplishment for him as well.
Yeah. Where's it go from
Now,
there
do you
after
have
that
in
adventure?
Nebraska? I'm sorry, say again.
Where's it go after that with that adventure? How's he top that?
Yeah, I told him he might as well just retire his bow and not do this anymore. He actually there's a up in Minnesota. There's a really big um the Army and all the military uses this land. It's Fort Ripley or Camp Ripley. And years ago, it used to always put out like monster deer. And it was an application only hunt. However, they had youth hunts that, they were able to, you sign up and you're a pretty good chance to get picked. However, the wolves they entered for some reason, and it's a huge chunk of property. And they decided, that the deer numbers were a little.
Oh, you cut out. Let's see if he comes.
And what if for some reason they decided to introduce wolves into Camp Ripley? And ever since then, the hunting has been a lot more difficult
Yeah.
and hunt really late in the game. So, but we probably like 130 kids thing, and they allow you scout a little bit the one area that they allow you to hunt and put up stands or ground blinds, and actually leave them in, I think, as well, because usually with the adult hunt, you have, like, if you go up in a climber stand or anything like that, you have to take it out with you every night. So the youth hunt there was a little different, and that was one where we went and it was super dry again and hot. Sorry, I just got attacked by a dragonfly. um, but some friends of ours had actually hit a deer the very first day, and Cole had a really good opportunity at a doe, but it was very windy, and she was wicked alert. And one of those where I've always heard people say, like, if you have a deer and their body language is like they know something's not quite kosher, that you have to like aim to miss. And this deer came in, and we knew that Cole's friend Dylan had hit one, but they were like asking for us to come help them track, because you have to be out at a certain, or at a checkpoint at a certain time, or they come looking for you. So Cole had an opportunity at a doe very late, and he had shot, and it was one of those where she ducked. I've never seen one go matrix style that way. That was intense. And so he missed. We went to go help Dylan track his. And Dylan was a kid where it was a friend of Cole's, same age in school. And he this was like the know-it-all kid that didn't work at it. Just everything was supposed to be easy. And so I know he didn't practice a whole lot. And I remember checking his bow one time, and I thought, my gosh, is this thing drawing even 30 pounds? It was incredibly light. And so when we found his arrow, there was no good penetration. And so it kind of had like a not looking too good. And so we unfortunately had to leave the camp because, of the curfew. And the next day we thought, well, what we'll do, they were seeing a lot of deer that day because they were near a swamp and it was so dry. Obviously water is key,
Right.
when you have dry time. And so we hunted their ground blind the next morning, and they just said, well, we'll sleep in the truck, and then whenever you guys are done hunting, then we'll track Dylan's deer again. So we get in the ground blind, and it was really dark yet, and I thought it was another hunter, because I thought something walked right by our ground blind, like almost like grazed the ground blind. And it started to get light, and down by the swamp there was a smaller 6-point buck, and we were watching it for a while. It was down like 50 yards downhill, and I'm like, well, it started to come up the hill after it drank a bunch of water, and I was like, this thing's gonna come right by the ground blind. So Cole started to draw his bow in the blind, and he drew back, but it was like the deer was facing us, and it was only like 20 yards away. And I'm like, don't take that shot. I don't know. Some people might be confident with a straight on deer shot. I just didn't feel like tracking a deer forever. I've never done it myself. Yeah, I didn't feel the risk was worth it. So I'm like, just hold tight. And the deer started to come on the trail that when it was light enough, we could actually see the trail. And the thing was maybe 7 yards. And I was taking video with my old crappy phone. And Cole just put like the absolute hurting shot on that. It was an absolute heart shot. And I remember Cole like immediately saying, that was a heart shot. I got him in the heart, Dad. And I was like, yeah. We watched the video, and so I text Dylan and his dad like, hey, Cole just shot a deer. If you guys want, give us like 20 minutes, and then I know Cole's deer is probably dead. We'll start hunting yours or tracking the one that they had hit the night before. So they instantly, Dylan was at our ground blind and he wanted to go look for his deer. That's fine. And we started tracking, and we had other families come and help us and try to track his deer. And it was just one of them, like there was like a drop every 100 yards. And it was crawling on hands and knees to get hot. And it was just miserable. And I was feeling nauseous and lightheaded. And I told Cole, I was like, let's go back to the ground blind and have a cooler. At least get something to eat and drink before we get back to tracking deer. And we went back to the ground blind, and I'm like, do you want to track your deer real quick? so we blood on that one. It was insane. It was like blood. And we had heard that Dylan had missed some deer the night before, or the prior day. And we found all of his arrows from him missing deer because they kept coming to that swamp that the day before. And it was so funny because one of the arrows of Dylan's had a bunch of Cole's blood on it, because when it went running by, it was just a stream. So that thing ran 25 yards and was stone dead. And we drug it actually into the woods to, because it was cooler in the woods. And then we tracked Dylan's deer for the rest of the day, basically, and just it was not good. So that was kind of the Camp Ripley hunt. And it was weird because with 135 kids in that hunt, there was only 2 deer shot. There was a small doe that like a yearling that a girl had got, and Cole had got that 6-point buck. So he's been a pretty darn good little hunter. Almost got too cocky at a young age, but now his archery thing, because not that deer hunting is easy, but he loves fishing. But he really got into the carp shooting and rough fish shooting, and that we have in Minnesota, and he lives for that. I've tried it. It's not my cup of tea, but you want to talk about a sport that has gotten, you think muskie fishermen are quiet with their spots or their lakes or they got something going or anything?
Yeah.
Carp people are worse than muskie people. I swear. They don't say nothing. When they're pre-spawn and they're cruising, they don't tell anybody. And it's like they're carp, man. You guys just go out and fill barrels of these things. But it kind of combines a little bit of the stocking of fish along with archery, and kind of Cole's newest thing and my newest thing, because I've had I don't have the greatest property. And in Minnesota, it's getting to the point now where, there's so many people that buy land, have land, but don't like hunters, or they have a cousin, a nephew, a uncle's brother's second wife removed something, that comes out there once a year for gun hunting. And, so then archery is like, it used to be easier to door knock and get permission, and it's gotten tougher. So I'm probably going to start picking up more of the state property, because Minnesota does have a lot of state land. But the turkey hunting has been, since they've kind of I don't want to say they've exploded, but there's definitely areas where there's a lot of them or more of them. They're the smartest dumb birds that's out there. And I have more fun watching them, even if I don't get a shot at them, seeing the stupid stuff that they do all the time. Last year, I had a bunch off. Unfortunately, I'm right-handed, and I had a bunch of them come out to my right, and I had no angle in the ground blind to spin around to get any shot to them. So I was just watching them, basically hoping they'd eventually cross in front of me. And all of a sudden, I saw their heads up like super high, like they were panicked, but looking at something. It was a cat. This cat came into the wood or out of the woods into the field, and these turkeys, I mean, followed this stupid cat. Were more curious about this cat that I think I'm going to get a stuffed animal, and that's going to be my turkey decoy next year. Is a cat with a
We
poofy
may,
tail, and just
there you
find a way
go.
to put a little.
Yeah.
Whoops.
You kind of cut out there for a second. You get a stuffed animals
And
where we left off.
oh, I'm sorry. It's yeah, the reception here, even with Verizon, is not the greatest. But yeah, I've never seen birds or turkeys more excited about something other, than a cat that crossed the field, followed it, would stay behind it. Or just the cat would lay down and they'd just get closer and look at it. Then the cat would stand back up and they'd move a little bit and then come right back. I mean, it was just hilarious. So stupid turkeys, I guess.
Yeah, I've heard guys tell where they shot a big tom, and the small ones come in and attacked it. And they are beating
Yeah.
up the one that just shot.
Yes. And that's one thing that, I mean, I know, since we're talking archery and such, that is the weirdest thing to me is, it every video I'd watch on turkey hunting, it made it look like you just hit them and they would flop, oh no. I mean, that shot placement has to be on freaking point,
Right.
And so like the first year I hit a Jake and I was like, this was easy. And that thing just jumped, flopped one time and then looked around and then just started walking around again. I'm like, what the heck? I hit that thing like I swear where I should have. They just have such a small kill zone.
Right.
So I don't know. I have some people, you always get someone saying, oh, just get the whatever broadhead and just lob their heads off. And I'm like, oh yeah, because their heads always sit still and give you a chance to anchor and shoot. Granted, I've watched videos on it, but no, I don't want to lose that many arrows missing deer's heads or turkey's heads. But I did get my second turkey this year with a bow, and that was very, very exciting. But yeah, that I had a friend of mine too who's a hardcore turkey hunter, and he said he tried it with a bow, shot one, tracked it for like over 2 miles. The thing never died, and he was like, hit another one another year, and now he's like, yeah, nope, I'm done. I just go back to just shoot him in the head with a gun. I'm like, well, that's too easy.
But they taste so good though.
They do, actually. Yeah, my son, he didn't do it with the bow. He's still like, yeah, he wants to spend most of his time at that time of the year in the spring in his boat chasing down carp with his bow fishing stuff. But yeah, getting back real quick to Cole too, it was strange. Like a lot of people probably follow different hunters, if you will. And Levi Morgan, is he the Matthews guy that went to Elite and then switched back to Matthews or something? And then there was another dude, John Dudley, and he was very good on social media. Loved his videos, very how he spoke, how he addressed everything, and he would answer your questions live. And I was getting a lot out of it. And I started asking him because it was like Cole had won a bow, he had already shot like 3 or 4 deer with a right-handed bow, and he won a new bow. And we went to go set it up. It was like think it was a diamond Infinite Edge or something. One of the first years
Yeah.
they had that youth bow. And anyways, he went to set it up and they did the eye test. And the guy was like, I'm not going to set up the bow for you. And we're like, what? And he's like, no, he's left eye dominant. And I'm like, what are you talking about? And he's like, it's just going to get worse. So I remember like he was kind of upset about it because he's like, I don't want to shoot left-handed. And, then with all the websites, Archery Talk was one of them, but I'd reached out to John Dudley and said,
Right.
hey, what would you do if, because his son, I think, is my son's age as well. And he said, eye dominance is only going to get worse in the future. So he's like, if he's a younger age, it'd be much easier for him to switch now before, he's an adult, and now it's much tougher.
Right.
Hold on real quick. Ryan, hit this weed line super slow. Like when you think you're going slow, go slower. And that's how slow you fish it, or slower than that. Okay. Got to do that thing. So okay. So then what happened is, I know at the time, like Dudley was really good and what I like is if you're sponsored by somebody, he didn't like push it hard on you or anything. It was just, hey, whatever bow he's comfortable with. He at the time, I think, was big with Hoyt. Now I think he's with PSE. I lose track of these guys, and sometimes when I see people switching and taking big paychecks, I start to, not that I say they lose credibility in my opinion, but it's just like, well, for the last 3 years I've been following you, you're just saying, Hoyt's the best. And then now you're with PSE. It's like, no, PSE is the best. And it's like, but the good thing was, as Dudley was really cool about, like, yeah, it don't matter, just whatever bow you're comfortable with. So I was on, I believe, the Archery Talk website, and I was asking a lot of questions about left-handed bows. And at the time, Elite seemed to be kind of coming on strong. I don't even want to say coming on strong. It's just I started to hear a lot about them being more shootable bow. And so then I'm like, well, the draw cycle, the everything that, is important. And if the kid's gonna switch hands, you want a bow that's like the smoothest drawing bow you can get.
Right.
And a lot of people said Elite was good. And obviously that Archery Talk website had like a left hand only forum or something. So you go in there and they'd have bows for sale. So you just start looking, and they were inexpensive. And there was a gentleman out of New York that was really generous. I told him the story about, Cole wanting to switch to a left hand bow. And that's what he was selling. He gave me a really good deal on it. I think it was like $300, $500, but it came with sights and peeps and a few arrows, and he mailed it all out. And that was super cool. And so Cole, it didn't take him long at all. So if anybody else has ever noticed, like maybe an eye is getting weaker or something like that, and they're afraid of, switching or going to a left hand. And again, I think now with technology, almost everybody's bow on the market draws well and holds well. But I remember when I bought my first Elite, then after, I had a friend of mine that had it was some turbo version of a bow. So he was like, this is a jumpy thing, but he wanted the fastest bow he could get. And my eyes were starting to take a dump on me at this point. I didn't know it. I just seemed like low light. I was like, God, is my peep twisting or something seems wrong? Because as soon as I can hit, I can aim, everything's perfect. And then as soon as low light happens, it's just like, is there a piece of the string in the way? I mean, it was just something was wrong. And so I went to his house. We were shooting off his deck, and it started to get low light. And I'm like, okay, Lawrence, like now it's like I can't see this. And he's like, well, let me see your bow. So he grabbed and he drew it back. And he was holding. He's like, oh, it looks clear to me. And I'm like, really? I said, nothing's in the way. And he's like, yeah, it's perfect. And he kind of like aimed down, and he was like, and I'm looking at him, and he looked all like kind of panicky. And I'm like, what's going on? He's like, usually when you change your angle greatly, the bow will creep on you, and the bow he had currently had crept incredibly bad. So he's always afraid, and that's how he lets his bow down. He would usually hold extra pressure on it, lean down or aim down, and then slowly try to let off. But that cam would engage and just pull you. And that elite didn't do it. And he's like, I should have never done that. I was like, why? He's like, that's crazy. He's like, I felt like I had to push it to get it to go. And yeah, I mean, it doesn't have the crazy speed. And I'm sure even now, technology has gotten where everyone's is good. And yeah, if you want the fast bow, you can
Hey, you're breaking up again.
wicked fast one, or if you want the one with the most inertia, you can get that one. It's gotten kind of crazy with the technology anyways with bows. So I don't know what you shoot, or maybe even just say, I'm just gonna start throwing arrows.
You're breaking up real bad.
Or spearing them.
Yeah, you're starting to break
Why
up.
don't you catch that bass?
Maybe turn off your camera to help.
Tell me when we're good again, because I'm standing.
I can hear the video is kind of lagging.
You moved.
Maybe just turn
You
off
moved
your
for
video.
a second. Moving. I apologize.
Yeah, now they just have to look at me and listen to you.
There's just a lot going on.
Yeah, there is.
I apologize.
No, that's all right. You're out there fishing. And we're just kind of honored.
A whole lot I can turn it off. How do I even do that? That sounds like technology stuff.
Yeah.
Oh, tell me if that's any better.
Yeah, that sounds pretty good.
That's okay. I'm not that pretty.
Yeah, when you're out on the lake, sometimes you don't know what you're going to have for reception. And yeah, he's got his video off, so he won't be in there. I'm not sure with the sound. When you're on a lake, you never know what you're going to run into, and we just kind of deal with what we have when we have it. And yeah, there's a lot of great stories in that. And I'll try and get a link to what he talked about, the group he's talking about in Michigan, and I'll put a link in the description and let everybody know where that's at. And while we're waiting for him to connect back in, he disconnected, so I think he's in a real bad position out there. So yeah, we'll just want to let you guys know the Arch Talk 101 Facebook group gets to listen to this live and comment on it, and join that group, and we'll do what we can do helping you out with whatever questions or problems you might happen to have. You can upload your video and we'll take a look at it. It's just a group of archers helping other archers out. There's no selling of products in this one, so we don't have to worry about a whole bunch of ads or anything. But yeah, it's been great talking with Corey, and out there in a boat. Yeah, I'm surprised I was able to talk this long. So that was really good. And we'll just kind of call this one for the day, and we'll talk to you guys a little bit later. Make sure you stay tuned for the next one. This one here is podcast number 109, and I'm having a whole lot of fun doing this, and I hope you guys are having a lot of fun too. So once again, my name is Roy Canterbury. I've been your host today on Arch Talk 101, and we'll see you in the next one.